By the time the FBI fully understood the scale of wealth in the Mafia's hands, it was already too late. The money had disappeared. It had neither been destroyed nor buried, but it had been laundered through Swiss accounts, Vatican records, and European banks that asked no questions. The Mafia hadn't merely established a criminal organization. At the same time, it had created a financial network that mirrored the legal economy so closely it was nearly indistinguishable. Welcome to financial history, the intersection of money, power, and history. And nothing here is as straightforward as it seems. The story begins on the small Mediterranean island of Sicily, a place long under foreign domination. Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, and Spaniards all established governance, yet left no lasting institutions. By the time Italy unified in the 19th century, Sicily remained poor, fragmented, and lawless. The new Italian state was distant and corrupt. Justice was not easily accessible. In this vacuum, a new model of power emerged. Not a state, but a network. A brotherhood that offered what the state could not: protection, enforcement, and silence. The first mafia groups were not gangsters. They were intermediaries. They enforced contracts for citrus growers, protected shipments, and collected debts. With courts and police unreliable, they ensured trade continued. But they also demanded payment, known as pizzo. If you didn't pay, oranges might rot in the orchards, workers could vanish, or your family might disappear. Over time, protection evolved into intimidation, and the Mafia transitioned from a service into a systematic structure. By the late 1800s, every sector in Sicily paid someone, from the ports of Palermo to the hills of Corleone. The Mafia did not just steal, it also governed. It mediated disputes, influenced elections, and took a cut from everything that moved. It became an invisible yet absolute parallel economy. And like any successful business, it diversified, engaging in livestock, citrus, agriculture, and smuggling. Capital was constantly reinvested, it never paused. Violence was branded and corruption was the business model. Then came Benito Mussolini. In the 1920s, the fascist leader vowed to eliminate the Mafia entirely. He sent Cesare Mori, a hardline police prefect, to Sicily with orders to restore state authority. Thousands were arrested. Many fled. For a time, it worked. The Mafia retreated underground, but never disappeared. It waited. 2 decades later, war provided opportunities. In 1943, when the Allies landed in Sicily, they needed local allies who knew the terrain, the ports, and the loyalties. They found them in the Mafia. U.S. military intelligence reached out to Sicilian-born New York Mafia leaders like Lucky Luciano in exchange for cooperation. In return for securing New York ports and facilitating the Sicily operation, Luciano's sentence was quietly reduced. The Mafia returned, legitimized by war. Post-war Sicily was flooded with reconstruction funds. Contracts for roads, housing, and infrastructure poured in. Billions flowed from Rome and Washington to rebuild southern Italy. The Mafia infiltrated everywhere. Politicians needed votes. Contractors needed security. Banks needed intermediaries. The gangs that once operated in agriculture transformed into businessmen in sharp suits. They established companies, won public contracts, and laundered funds through real estate. The Mafia had evolved from men with guns to financial institutions. By the 1950s, Palermo was rapidly developing. The sky was crowded with cranes. Concrete poured day and night. Locals called it Il Sacco di Palermo, the sack of Palermo, because the Mafia was openly looting the city through urbanization. Entire neighborhoods were demolished, and public funds were funneled through Mafia-linked construction firms for redevelopment. Profits were enormous. As Italy celebrated its economic miracle, another shadowy one unfolded. A private capital network extending beyond Sicily was emerging. The heroin trade made the Mafia global. Sicily became a key point in the transatlantic supply chain. Morphine base from Turkey was processed in Sicilian labs, shipped via Marseille, and sold in the U.S. By the mid-1960s, the French connection supplied nearly the entire U.S. heroin market. Profits, hundreds of millions of dollars, had to be laundered. Cash was bulky, risky, and impractical. It had no value until cleaned. The Mafia developed a new skill: financial invisibility. They directed profits through offshore companies and anonymous trusts, investing in Swiss and Luxembourg banks. They acquired hotels in Palermo, vineyards in Tuscany, and shell companies in Panama. They realized that the real power of money lay not in spending it, but in hiding it. The 1970s marked the peak of this strategy. The Mafia forged connections not just with politicians, but with powerful bankers. Banco Ambrosiano became central to this network. Italy's largest private bank had close ties to the Vatican Bank, formerly known as the Institute for Religious Works. On paper, it was a charity. In practice, it functioned as a financial black hole, exempt from Italian law. At the heart of this network was Roberto Calvi, known as the God's Banker. Calvi established a web of offshore companies in Panama, Luxembourg, and the Bahamas to secretly transfer billions. Some of the funds came from political corruption, some from the Mafia, and later research revealed part also came from the Vatican. In 1982, everything collapsed. Banco Ambrosiano went bankrupt with $1.3 billion in missing funds. Calvi fled Italy in fear. Days later, he was found hanging under London's Blackfriars Bridge, cash and bricks in hand. Forensic experts declared it a suicide. Most believed it was murder. The Mafia never resorted to court appeals. The scandal revealed an uncomfortable truth. The boundaries between organized crime, politics, and finance had long vanished. The Vatican quietly paid compensation, but did not admit guilt. Officials resigned, yet the shadow financial machine persisted. After Banco Ambrosiano's collapse, the Mafia adapted. Violence in the 1980s drew unwanted attention. Judges were killed, bombs exploded, and gang wars erupted. Business suffered. The next generation, dubbed the white-collar mafia, replaced bullets with balance sheets. Investments shifted to stocks, real estate, and global trade. Money laundering methods grew more sophisticated. By the 1990s, Italy's Anti-Mafia Commission estimated organized crime generated over $100 billion annually, roughly 7% of the national GDP, making the Mafia Italy's largest enterprise. Compared to firms like Fiat or Eni, it was untaxed and unregulated. It operated entirely on cash and secret accounts. Even when authorities applied pressure, money simply moved elsewhere. London, Switzerland, Luxembourg, the Caribbean. Each new restriction taught the Mafia to act faster and conceal ownership through shell companies and proxies. By the 2000s, Mafia wealth was so integrated into legitimate businesses that economists struggled to distinguish where clean Italy ended and criminal Italy began. It was no longer just the Sicilian Mafia. 'Ndrangheta from Calabria, Camorra from Naples, and foreign cartels adopted the same methods. They penetrated global markets, acquired luxury properties, and took stakes in legitimate companies. Money that was once local crime proceeds had gone global. Today, authorities estimate that 2 to 5% of global GDP is laundered annually, over $2 trillion. Some comes from traditional crime, but most stems from corruption, tax evasion, and corporate fraud. The structure, the model the Sicilian Mafia built a century ago, remains intact: anonymous ownership, untraceable transfers, and silence. Ironically, what was once organized crime now closely resembles organized finance. Techniques developed by Mafia accountants, layered transactions, offshore assets, bearer shares, are now used by billionaires, corporations, and governments. The Mafia did not disrupt capitalism, it understood it. The Mafia controls the ports, companies control the supply chains. The Mafia wields intimidation. Modern finance uses debt. The Mafia laundered money through real estate. Global investors do the same legally, inflating housing markets. The difference lies only in documentation. The Sicilian Mafia didn't just establish a criminal empire, it created an economic philosophy. Money doesn't care where it comes from, only where it goes. These stories are not relics of the past. They remain relevant today. Oligarchs hide wealth in London, politicians channel funds through offshore trusts, and companies move profits to avoid taxes, all exploiting networks the Mafia built. Names have changed, but the system remains. The Vatican, after decades of scandal, still struggles with transparency. The bloody era of the 1980s largely ended. Today's real leaders wear suits, not leather jackets. They sit not in back rooms, but on corporate boards. Violence has become financial, quiet, subtle, invisible. Money laundering is now the preferred tool of control. The real godfather was not a gunman, but an accountant, the one who knew how to make illicit money disappear. The Mafia's innovation was not threat, but integration. They merged criminal proceeds with legal capital, making it indistinguishable. There lies their genius. The lesson is unsettling but clear. Power structures do not need law to survive, only organization. The Mafia built one of modern history's most efficient private economies. It understood a fundamental truth about money. Laws are negotiable, liquidity is not. Sicily's impoverished past reached a new end through capital mastery. Its shadow persists in anonymous accounts, offshore trusts, and unaccountable investment funds. They demonstrated how to weaponize trust, circumvent transparency, and turn secrecy into an asset.